Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on concepts before coding, teaching computing without computers. My name is Tim Wilson, I'm your host, and Rachel Vidler is your presenter today, who I will shortly introduce. So just a little bit about me. I'm the Computing at School Community Outreach Manager for the Midlands. I'm responsible for the regional growth and delivery of Computing at School Communities of Practice, and which is also part of the National Centre for Computing Education. This webinar is the latest in our CAS Inspire series, a series of resources consisting of live webinars like this one with expert panelists such as Rachel discussing topical computing education matters in which you, the audience, can get actively involved. CAS Inspire also features videos, podcasts and careers inspiration webinars all around computing. So a little bit about Rachel, our speaker today. Rachel is a qualified teacher with a wealth of experience in computing and using technology in the classroom. Her experience in schools has led her to work as a subject matter expert for STEM learning and the National Centre for Computing Education. Rachel offers guidance and training for primary schools alongside facilitating CPD courses for the NCCE. Rachel is also a very active CAS community leader and keeps on top of the ever-changing aspects of technology and computing. Rachel is also a Raspberry Pi certified educator, Apple teacher, and Seesaw ambassador. So, for you guys, if you have questions for Rachel during the session today, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. As you probably realize, all attendees are in listen-only mode. The top of your window on your dashboard has an orange rectangle which can be expanded or collapsed. There is also a copy of Rachel's slides to download during this session. These are available in the handout section on your dashboard. If you're using social media or tweeting, as it were, the hashtag for the event is CASInspire20. During the webinar, if you have questions in the window, please type them into the question window, and I will ask them to Rachel at regular intervals through this webinar. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand you over to Rachel, who will kick off. Rachel, it's all yours.
Brilliant. Right, thank you, Tim. Yeah, like Tim said, just before I kick start, because I know it is one thing that what I'm going to do today is probably throw a load of information at you. Hopefully you'll find it useful, but sometimes, you know, afterwards kind of processing all of that. On the right hand side there is the handout, so the exact presentation that I'm doing today, feel free to save it, share it. It's got our contact details on, it's got the hashtag on, but obviously, you know, if you're looking at this as an SLT or a member of computer needs and you want to share it with your staff afterwards, then please do. So please do download that. Questions or anything, pop them in the chat like Tim said, and then I will pause and answer as and when they kind of appear. So what we are looking at today, or what I'm going to focus on today, is something that's really prevalent, I think, with regards to computing and the subject of computing, and it's all about concepts before coding. So I think in too many instances, you know, I work with a lot of schools, and you see schools kind of move on to abstract platforms, so they're using Scratch or different coding platforms. And I think we kind of, as a teacher, have a tendency to move on there too quickly without actually understanding the concept that underpins what pupils are learning. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about pedagogy, a little bit about theory today, and some practical places to find some resources, stuff to take away, and how you can hopefully then kind of manipulate and change your curriculum. Because unfortunately, with Ofsted and deep dives and things like that, they are massively looking at progression of skills, and this is a really nice way to kind of feed that into your practice. So hopefully take away some stuff that you can kind of tie into what you're already doing. So I'm going to kind of look at three different things really. Break down the national curriculum briefly, which some of you may have been aware of, but it's just something that makes it a little bit easier for organising your curriculum. Looking at computational thinking for the subject. So again, taking some of the concepts there that should underpin what you're doing as practice and how you can kind of bring them back into your classroom through some unplugged kind of teaching. Again, look at some unplugged stuff for different year groups and give you some websites or some places to go to download some resources that I would recommend. But what you will find there with unplugged is there's loads of stuff out there. And then lastly, going to spend a bit of time on the Key Stage 2 concepts. When we look at the national curriculum, there is a lot more at Key Stage 2 than Key Stage 1, and especially when you look at the statement which has what you're meant to teach, it's kind of looking again how you can put the concepts in to make sure that understanding is embedded before you move them onto a platform. So in theory, it should make your life easier as a teacher, knowing that the children have the understanding before just putting them on to Scratch, for argument's sake, to work. So first things first, and if you've joined some other sessions, I do apologise because it's kind of something that I just like to start with because I think it does help, is looking at the national curriculum. So 2014 change from ICT to computing, there was a lot more emphasis on computer science, and that's obviously what we're going to talk about today when we're talking about programming and we're talking about coding. But what I always like to kind of point out is that there's 3 strands, and this isn't something I've made up, this is something that's been out there for a long time, you know, the NCC even mention it, but it's the way in which it helps to break down your curriculum, because I think as a computing lead, you can almost get, well, the curriculum itself is pretty poor because it doesn't give you a lot to work on, but obviously to guide your teachers on what they're teaching and what they're actually probably already achieving, I break it down into these 3 strands. So you've got computer science, information technology, and digital literacy. And what you'll find is you're probably already hitting some of the strands in the stuff that you were doing in the old curriculum. That comes into your IT. And digital literacy, again, a lot of schools are doing that. I'm not going to talk about digital literacy in this session, but if you haven't, please look at the guidance called Education for a Connected World. I can throw this at Tim now, see if he'll find the link and put it in the chat. But Education for a Connected World and Project Evolve, there is lots of good stuff in there that I would massively recommend for digital literacy, like your online safety stuff. But anyway, looking at the curriculum objectives, this is how the national curriculum is broken down at Key Stage 1. So like you'll see here, there's not a lot of guidance. And bearing in mind, Ofsted say you need to have progression. This is your progression here through Key Stage 1. So what they kind of, and what we're going to look at today and focus on, I guess, with the concepts is those 3 computer science strands. So understanding what algorithms are and their programs and digital devices, creating and debugging, and then using logical reasoning. So the words in bold there are words that we'll kind of focus on throughout this session. And then if you look at it comparatively at Key Stage 2, there is a little bit more. But again, what you've got to think about, and this is one thing that I always think as a teacher, is these are your objectives over 4 years in Key Stage 2. So cannot stress enough, stuff today, looking at the different skills that they should be learning at different points and how to teach it will help you just put in some natural progression of how the subject lends itself anyway. So again, you've still got computer science, you've got a lot more information technology, which we're not going to touch on today because, like I say, that's a completely different strand. We're going to look at this computer science, which is that discrete teaching of these different skills. And that second objective there on the curriculum, that's the one that I'm going to focus on the second half, because the things that you are meant to teach the children, like sequence, selection, repetition, and variables, they are all skills all in themselves. And actually, if you can give your teachers some resources that help them understand the concept, when they get onto Scratch, even teachers will find it a lot easier to deliver because they understand what they're teaching rather than it just being an abstract kind of block piece of coding that they use on Scratch, which means nothing to them. So hopefully that's what we're going to take away from today. And then just one thing that I share with schools is then this is kind of how I organise it. So obviously you'll have all these slides. If it's something you want to take back into your school, you can. But what I always say is that computer science is that discrete teaching which needs to be done almost in that standalone manner. Your IT software will incorporate into other subjects, like the 2 previous Class Inspire webinars that I've done that are available to watch back and play back. We did one on English and we did one on art. And those links can be made in your cross-curricular subjects with regards to your software. And then again, that digital literacy, I have it as an ongoing strand because anytime you're using technology and it ties into your new RSE document, which was compulsory this year, there's a lot of crossover in how you're going to deliver your online safety. So what I'm going to talk about first is a little bit of pedagogy and then sequencing of skills. And the pedagogy that I kind of like to look at, and again, this is more something that I've kind of focused on. Again, there's probably schools that do something similar. This is just something that I believe how I would teach computing, and I think this is specific to computer science. It's specific to your coding and programming. You know, if you're looking at software development, if you're looking at Microsoft or, you know, using Tinkercad for 3D design, if you're looking at a skills-based application like IT, which is software, I would just do your knowledge and skills and then your application. So if you're using Microsoft Word, you're going to teach them the skills to be able to use that program, and then they're going to apply their knowledge in some kind of, you know, task. Computer science, I take it as a little bit differently. And how I plan my units with schools and how I've taught it is it's under these 3 tiers. So it starts with unplugged understanding, moves on to concrete, and then lastly you go to abstract, which are those applications or those software or those websites and tools like that. This is something that I massively stress that helps in your progression. It helps in understanding how your curriculum flows, and I do this every year. So on every opportunity, it's unplugged in every year group just to reinforce the concepts that we're going to talk about today. Concrete understanding when you're introducing a new skill to kind of make sure that the children really understand what they're doing. And then lastly, we'll move on to an app to apply what we've learned. So it is just a piece of pedagogy that you can kind of take if you want. You don't have to, but this is how I believe, you know, if you think about maths concepts, which has been loads and loads of research into and evidence, you don't move to abstract stuff. You wouldn't move to column addition before putting in all the legwork, before putting in all the practical resources, you know, abstract stuff, actually making them do it first, and then that's your last port of call. So in my opinion, as a teacher, thinking pedagogy and thinking what I learned at university, why would it be any different for what I'm teaching for computing? And just to kind of then emphasize these three things, which I will talk about today and give you some resources. So Unplugged is basically where you're taught computing, you're taught programming in a relatable way with nothing to do with technology. So you don't pick up a piece of equipment, you don't get a computer, a tablet, a VBot, you don't even do any of that. It's before that. It's understanding what an algorithm is, understanding what we mean by debug, understanding how to be logical in our sequencing, even understanding sequencing in itself. What does it mean to order things? So it's all of these things which are taught. I always say, and I will come back to it with some of the activities I show, these, when teachers walk into my lessons, it is organised chaos. Okay, it should be lots of practical in nature, it should be lots of conversation starters, it should be open-ended questions to get the children to think and understand what they're actually trying to learn. So you do have to, some of the activities are a bit, you look at them, you know, kids are massively engaged in this stuff, but there will be those elements where it's not nice and neat and they're all sat at a desk and doing what you want them to do, kind of thing. But the vocabulary and the understanding and the skills that they develop in these lessons will then feed into further lessons. So I'll show you some of those ones. A lot of schools do unplug stuff and then they go straight into abstract. This is just my kind of like in-between stage really, which is this concrete, which I say has a massive value. So this is where you're pretty much reinforcing the computational thinking that they've already learned. So they may have learned how to sequence through unplugged activities. Okay, they may have understood what an algorithm is. But then before you put them onto Scratch, for argument's sake, I would use the visuals of the platform they're going to use, but in a practical way. Okay, so you'll have seen it with BBots in Key Stage 1 where you do human BBots, where you're printing off the cards, the children are acting as the BBot or the computer or the robot, and someone else is giving them an algorithm through these practical codes for them to do. So you take them in a hall, put spots around the hall, and they've got to get from one side to the other. Okay, but you're not controlling a robot, you're not programming a robot at this stage, you're writing an algorithm for a human. It's the same that you can do really nicely. The second bit of code here, this is from Scratch Junior. If you don't use Scratch Junior in Key Stage 1, would really recommend looking into it. My first lesson is always unplugged. It's this concrete stage. So we've done our understanding of what algorithms are previously in the term. Our first lesson is I print off all the code. We look at what the code means. Why is it color coded? What do the different colors mean? Can they understand what each code does? Then once they've got an understanding of what the code is, then they try and write algorithms for their partners. Again, so I might give them a task and ask them to do it and their partner acts it out. So it's just that nice little concrete step, and especially if you do it in Scratch through some of the resources that I'll show you later on today, it makes Scratch less daunting both for teachers and for pupils, because going onto Scratch, it is a minefield the first time you go on there that teachers just go, oh my god, there's too much code to do. And yes, in some instances I agree with you. I would use other coding platforms like code.org or Code for Life to kind of build up stages, but at the end of the day, Scratch is what they're going to be exposed to. This step's just going to help them before they get there. And then lastly, that kind of abstract. So that's where you've got different apps, different applications, different pieces of software for the children to then apply what they've learned. So if they know and they've learned the skill of repetition, get them to make a game on Scratch, get them to go onto a different light bot and kind of show how they can use it. That is just a picture there. That is an extensive list of apps. But one thing I would say, if you are a subject leader and you are planning out computer science across your school, I would make sure that each year group knows what they're doing. Okay, otherwise you get to this thing where schools, you know, if you just go into Code Club and use one of the units, if you don't specify what, you get this massive crossover. So again, I'm going to show you later what I would teach in what year groups, and then that would be how I would set my tasks and what the children are going to do. So first part of this session is all along computational thinking, okay, and a brilliant website for this, which this is pulled from, is Barefoot. If you haven't heard of Barefoot, I would massively say to go and sign up to them. This is where Tim's really good now, and without me even prompting him, he'll probably find a link and put it in. But Barefoot is a non-for-profit organisation. They're all free. They have loads of resources. Some of the resources I'm going to pull from today are from Barefoot, and what they even offer, although probably more remotely in this climate of learning, is they even offer like free staff training, so free CPD for staff. They'll come in and do 2 workshops for free on stuff like this, on unplugged activities, on computational thinking. So this is what I've pulled from here. And basically what Barefoot has is they have these different concepts, which are things that children need to understand, or they should understand within their computing, and I'll go through these in a minute. And then they have different approaches. Okay, the approaches I think are really interesting to look at and to structure these into your sequence of lessons. A lot of them you will obviously do. Okay, it's a bit of a mindset stuff with your collaboration and your persevering. You cannot, and I always say to children, I still teach every week in schools, you will never get anything right first time in computing, you know, and you need to talk with each other to kind of pick it up. So these are the kind of the approaches and skills of things that should underline your lessons. And the first one here, tinkering. I'm sure lots of you will have heard of this before. If you haven't, oh my God, put tinkering time into your lessons. I always do it on the first thing that I teach. If I'm introducing a new piece of software, I give them 10-15 minutes tinkering time with some guided questions on the board to explore to kind of guide their exploration. But it is massively important to give them time to have a look at something. I would say if you're doing bebots with year one and you're going to put a bebot in front of a child and for the first lesson expect them to listen to you, they won't. Let them get that out of their system first through that tinkering and that exploration, because it actually has a place, to be honest, in computing. So on the slide you'll get this, which is a bit of an overview of the concepts and the approaches, but I'm just going to go through the concepts one by one for you, just to kind of have a look at them and almost to make them seem less daunting or less scary, because a lot of this you'll be doing anyway. So when we talk about logic, you know, children need to kind of have an understanding, and logic is mentioned both in the Key Stage 1 curriculum and the Key Stage 2 curriculum, just as why we're doing something or why something happens, okay? Computers will follow programs. I always teach the children that computers are silly or they're stupid. They'll only do what you tell them to do, so they need to be logical in their thinking, okay? And this isn't something that's new. You know, if you look at cross curricular, there are opportunities to have the vocab and the language linked into other subjects because it's stuff that they're doing already, okay? DT, what material is best? What's the most logical material that you're going to use? And how I kind of say this in Key Stage 1, you can bring it in. So in Key Stage 1, if you're using bebots for argument's sake, if you've got roots, you can start to do roots, which is a really nice progression just to going from A to B. And then I always say, what's the most logical way? Okay, what's the shortest way, which is the way that you're going to go? What have you got to avoid? So it's something that they need to know in both Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, but it's not news in a sense. Algorithm was then something that I guess came in the 2014 change and scared everyone. Two words, main words, algorithm and debug. Those are the two that threw all the teachers. An algorithm is just a set of instructions. That is it. That's all you need to really teach your pupils. And through these unplugged activities, it's the one thing that you're teaching them every year. In my opinion, I would do unplugged activities in every year group, just to emphasize that understanding of what an algorithm is, okay? Algorithms are written for humans, so it is for a human to follow. When you put it into a robot or a computer, it becomes a program, essentially. But it is literally just a step-by-step set of instructions. So when I go to loads of schools, they do, oh, we're doing instructional writing in English. I'm like, brilliant, tie in your unplugged activities as part of that. Okay, the crossover is there, the sequence, the ordering, the being precise. That's all about algorithms. And like I say, it is not just setting it is not just down to computing. You can start to do this language across things. So I used to have algorithms. I used to call my success criteria as algorithms sometimes in English, because it was like, well, what are my steps for actually making the sentence make sense? Okay, the same as debugging. Debugging is just to find an error and fix it. So the bug is something that's wrong, to debug it is to make it right. So you used to use it in English all the time. It debug your sentence, there's something wrong with it. Or even a word with Key Stage 1, when they put capital letters in a word, I just go, there's a bug in your word somewhere, can you debug it and find it? I even used to do it all the time, like if they were lining up for playtime and there were some kids that should not be sat together, I was like, there's a bug in our line, debug, everyone move. So it's just flooding them with this language. But algorithm was the one that scared everyone, and it is just a set of instructions, simple as that. Decomposition is something then that comes in at Key Stage 2. Again, nothing that we don't already do. We decompose stuff. Again, if you're thinking about non-chronological reports, you're going to decompose that into paragraphs, into an introduction, your main body, and your conclusion. Okay, so we're already doing it. It's just about getting that language across. And I always say in these lessons, it isn't the discrete teaching of this language, it's teaching them the skill to be able to break something down. So if we find something hard in code, what can we do? We're going to break it into smaller parts. Patterns, again, covered in maths, English, music, there's loads of stuff here. It's just about, this is one of those computational thinking things. There are lessons and one I'll show you that helps to look at patterns. Again, it's not necessarily having a lesson going, we are looking at patterns today, but it's allowing children those skills to understand and see that in code to then copy it. And you'll see that a little bit later on in some of like the repetition like activities that I'd suggest to kind of do. And then the last one really is abstraction. Abstraction is something that it's not necessarily mentioned in the Key Stage 2 curriculum, it is more in the Key Stage 3 curriculum, but it's something that doesn't harm kind of showing children or having, again, it's not children necessarily going, oh, I'm doing abstraction today, but them knowing that they can simplify things. So when you're making code, it's what's the important part of what we want to achieve, that's what we're going to focus on, okay? Ignore everything else. And if I do teach it, I just kind of use the tube map as an example here, because the tube map is everything in order, but actually the distance there doesn't work. If you measure it on this map and then compare it to actually real life, it's not relevant. So they've ignored measurement and distance, and they've just created a map like this. Tim, I'm presuming we have a question maybe.
Oh, not a question, but a comment from Rachel. Rachel Coulthard. She said her comment is, so agree with Rachel about the vocabulary being key. Love it when my reception children start talking about debugging their Lego models. Also, additional comment, our visual timetables with the icons they have for each subject are also a great example of abstraction.
Yeah,
those are the two
perfect.
comments. So,
thank you. Cool, thank you. And I would agree with both of them. You know, it's not, when I do computing, it's kind of dropping this in as and when. It's not like kind of saying we are learning abstraction today, because that would be a really boring lesson, but it's kind of, as teachers, having an understanding of what skills come into what year group, and then understanding that that's the kind of stuff you have to drip feed in. And I completely agree though, debugging and algorithm are two words that you can use from EYFS. That's brilliant that they're doing it down there. And visual timetables, I'm going to talk about how you can do this with the school day. So that's a really good way that you can kind of use it. And then the last one that's mentioned, obviously, in the computer at school, the barefoot vocabulary is evaluation, which this comes in all the time. You're going to do this if you're making a game, it's not going to go right first times. It's about that peer and self-evaluation. What can we improve? How can we make it better? But again, it's done across all curriculums. You know, it's done in success criteria, it's done in English, it's done in hot writes when you're marking it. So let's just bring that back into the subject. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk you through, and this way your visual timetable could be an example of you doing this in school if you want to, but just to kind of show you how those skills that I've mentioned can transfer into an activity. I'm going to take the most simple activity, and this is one that I do with Key Stage 1, and I would probably repeat it in year 5, but obviously with a bit more progression. And this is where I look at just the school day, okay, or any day. With Key Stage 1, I did it on Friday, and we just did getting up. We went from waking up to getting to school. So we think about when we brush our teeth, when we get dressed, when we get out of bed, that kind of stuff. But what you can do is you can actually do all of those skills in this one activity. And it's not necessarily about going, we're teaching abstraction, it's just about these skills. The first thing I would do if I was planning this activity, before I even have any cards for them to order, I would ask them to draw or verbalise what a day in their life is. Okay, now what they're doing is they are doing abstraction in their head of what are the most important things in my day. Am I going to do everything from getting up, turning around, rolling over, getting out of bed? No, they're going to break it down. They're already going to use that skill of what's important. And if they're not, that's when you can come in with your guidance and say, well, what are the key things of a school day? What do we need to know? Do we need to know the fact that we're going to get a book out, or do we need to know that it's English? So starting to embed those skills in your practice. This is a really nice one as well for then sequencing, which is algorithms, and it comes into logic as well. So what I do with Key Stage 1 in the simplest form is have these cut out or ask them to draw it and get them to order them into the right order. Okay, in the simplest sense, they are creating an algorithm for me to know their school day. So they're having to put it into an order. It's a set of instructions for me to know what I'm going to do first, second, and after that. Okay, and like you'll see, if you're going to do instructional writing, you can tie in all those time connectives and stuff. It can have links of English if you want to use it in that way afterwards. When they've got an algorithm, when they've got it laid out, then I get them to debug. I get someone to check, do they agree with it? Yes or no? Why? What's wrong? Does it make sense to, you know, get dressed last or first? It's that kind of questions and that kind of vocabulary to see if there is anything, and thinking about logic. What order are you going to do it in and why? If you then want to, more at Key Stage 2, but you could do this with greater depth if you're doing this in year 2. If you want to add in some decomposition, well, then can they break the part up to smaller parts? Okay, so at school, and if we were taking the one on the board, well, what do we do at school? You know, our first subject break, second subject lunch, that kind of thing. So they can always go further. They can decompose it into smaller parts and break it down and look at it that way. So you can introduce that skill. And it's really nice then, again, this is more Key Stage 2, but then looking at patterns. So is there anything that happens every day? So every day at 9 o'clock we have an assembly. So they're starting to look at what's the same in their school day, what's different, and things like that, and just trying to identify those patterns. And then obviously Key Stage 2, and we'll look at this later, then you could have repetition. So if every morning you get up, have breakfast, brush your teeth, we could have that as a loop, and we could repeat that Monday to Friday rather than us typing it every day. So they're starting to kind of introduce those concepts of what they mean. And even if you wanted to do this with Key Stage 2, you could have the same with selection, which I will talk about later what selection is, but that's your conditions. So if it's 3:15, then we go home. Okay, if it's a Saturday or Sunday, then we don't do this. So you're starting to just introduce those basics, but that's a really simple activity, just organising the school day, an algorithm for the school day, but how you can put in those computational thinking, understanding those skills at different levels. Okay. So what I'm going to do really quickly next is I'm going to show you a few different unplugged activities. Okay, and what I would say is this is something that, and again, this is just my recommendation from working with schools and having delivered it. This person is something that I do every year. And I say that children need to understand these skills, they need to understand this thinking before you put them on a computer. And it is more prominent now, and it's got a lot more legs now because of schools not being able to use equipment. Because of the state we're in, some schools are going, well, I can't use my ICT suite, I can't use the iPads, I need to unplug stuff. Yes, you can, and that is amazing that it's going prevalence and that it's actually been taught now, but that shouldn't just be the only thing that you do. You can get all this understanding, and I think it has a massive place. You still need to get them to apply it on a piece of technology that you can. But if you're in a state now where you're going actually until spring, we can't use computers, then pull in some of these lessons and make sure that you're developing the understanding, because it's going to put them in so much better stead. So I do at the start of every computer science unit. I normally do it in the autumn term. It's my first couple lessons, but if I was doing a digital literacy unit first or something, I would do it at the start of my computer science. I do it every year group. There are enough activities out there that you can have 2 lessons, and that's all it is, 1 or 2 lessons from year 1 to year 6. And there is some stuff in EYFS as well that I kind of pull back in, some basic stuff in EYFS. Practical in nature, like I say, bit of organised chaos. I'll show you a few of these so you'll kind of get that. But every year group can do them and build in those different skills. So just a few different ones that I'm going to show you, and there's loads out there. But on the handout, I've got the links to some of these. This is one that looks at algorithms and patterns. This you may have seen, it's from a website called Code-IT, which I'm going to talk about a lot today. It's a guy called Phil Bagg. If you're on Twitter, follow him. He's really good. And this isn't new, this has been around for years. But this is one which is called Human Crane. So what you have is you have 3 bowls. I just print off pictures of bowls that are laminated. I've got a set that I use in school. You have all of these cards, and they have some multi-link. And they have different challenge cards which ask them to get for the multi-link from this picture to this picture. Okay. Then with Key Stage 1, so I would do this with Key Stage 1. It can feed into Key Stage 3 because actually the second half of the challenge cards get quite hard. They have to lay out, they have to create an algorithm. So they're using that vocabulary. They lay out these cards in the order to then get the multi-link to where it needs to go. So I have them in paired programming. Someone is the computer, someone is the person writing the algorithm, and then the person is the computer tests it. And again, it's just that stuff of a computer will only follow what you tell it to do. So even if it's wrong, you've got to do it. Getting them to think about algorithms, getting them to think about sequencing and logic and what way they're going to do it. And certainly the second half of these, they have to really think about logic because it wants them in certain orders. So it's a really, really nice starting point for them to think about an algorithm. They're not doing any writing any code, they're using pictorial code, but they're understanding, or they're starting to understand, that it's a sequence of ordered instructions to get a computer to do something. So that's kind of on there that you can download. Another one at Key Stage 1 that I really like is this one, which you'll have seen. This is from Barefoot Computing. So whereas they obviously look at computational thinking, they have loads of resources. So that link will take you straight to this lesson, but obviously take off the back bit, you've got resources to find all of them. This is called a crazy characters lesson. This is really nice. Again, I normally do this in year 2, but you could do it in any year group, where they write an algorithm to create their own monster or their own character. So I normally manipulate the sheet a little bit. I cut this off. I get them to write it down. Obviously, I work in a year 1-2 classroom sometimes. The year 1s just draw, the year 2s will normally write something alongside it. They write an algorithm. And then the best way that I've taught this, although you can do this in different ways, is I then get them in 3s. So the person has their algorithm card. 2 people have a bit of paper. The person whose algorithm it is reads the algorithm out without the other people seeing. I normally get them to sit back to back, because what you will want them to do again is they'll normally go certainly at Key Stage 1 going, oh, that's not what I meant. And that's what you don't want them to be able to do, because a computer will do what you tell it to do, whether it's right or wrong, it's going to do what you tell it to do. And this is what they need to kind of understand at Key Stage 1. So the 2 children back to back draw the same picture, turn around, does it look identical? No, it won't. Then you can start to introduce, well, actually, we've got to be precise. So can you debug your algorithm? Can you add in that extra detail to make sure that your picture is going to look like what you want it to do? Because essentially they should be able to create an algorithm where they give it to 2 different people and they produce the exact same character. Okay, it doesn't happen. That's what I mean. It's that organized chaos, but it's that vocabulary and that understanding through talk that you want them to get, to go, well, no, actually, they look completely different. Why? Oh, it's because I didn't tell you where to put the eyes. It's because I didn't tell you how big to draw the body or what shape to draw the body. So it's a really nice practical activity. Use it in any year group, but it's kind of Key Stage 1 there that they can kind of look at that. And then one other activity, again, more Key Stage 1, but you could kind of use anywhere, Lego based or multi-link. This is one that kind of, again, it shows you a bit like that school day, how you can tie in all of the different thinking into one activity. So this is where you get two children to, or you get a child to build a Lego model. I normally get them to build 2 Lego models. Someone builds 2 Lego models. They keep one built, so this is what you're trying to get the children to draw, and then they break one down into lots of pieces. Children sit back to back, and then the person with the Lego model has to give an algorithm or a set of instructions to build the model. Okay, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create this algorithm for their partner who they cannot see to make the monster or make their model. They've got to be precise. They've got to think about a logical step, what they're going to start with, the head or the legs. You know, they've got to kind of think about all this stuff themselves. Turnarounds, do they look the same? Yes or no? Probably not. They'll have the head turned on wrong. They won't have everything right. Then that's when you debug. Okay, what steps did we get wrong? How could we improve this? Upper Key Stage 2, if you want to do it there, they could write their instructions. They've actually got something to debug. With the lower ones, you're just really getting them to understand that concept of the need to be precise. Okay, and then what I obviously put on here as well, which is quite nice for abstraction, which is not something I would teach the language to Key Stage 2, or Key Stage 1, sorry. But if you've got great deaf children or children who are really good at this, they've obviously broken up 2 models. Their partner has all the pieces that they need to make that Lego. Okay, what I normally do, and they hate me, is I go get a handful of random Lego and drop it in their pile. Now they really need to think about their algorithm, because they've got things that they don't need in that pile. So they can't just go get the green one, because now they might have 5 green ones. So they've really got to think about their instructions and being precise. So if you have got children who are really good, go and annoy them and do that. But it's just another activity. But like you'll see, none of these are talking about computers. None of these are picked up at a computer. They're all just practical in nature. And then the same kind of thing as the crazy characters at year 4. And again, this is just showing you how you can put in the algorithm, logic, debugging, how all of these skills can come into one lesson. I do the same thing with a house. So again, get a piece of paper, get them to draw a house, and only give them a minute. Can you draw a house? That's what you've done. Then I go, right, I want an algorithm for this house. So your algorithm is going to get a stranger when a partner's come up, and it's got to be identical to the one that you've just drawn. Okay, they write their steps, they sit back to back, or they hide their pictures so they can't see what someone else is drawing. Turn it over. Does it look exactly the same as your house? 9 times out of 10, no, it doesn't. And then you go, why? Okay, can you debug it? What have we done? Are we logical in our order? Have we not been precise enough? So it's all of those kind of things. And you can do that with anything. I normally, when I first do my CPD with staff, or even with children, I get them to draw a kite, and I'm so awful in my instructions. Or with lower Key Stage 1, I get them to draw a smiley face. So I just go draw a circle, draw 2 more circles, draw a semicircle, and that's it. And then I see what they've drawn, and they've drawn nothing. And in my head, I'm like, well, you're drawing a smiley face. And they're going, well, no, because your instructions were rubbish, Miss Fiddler. And I go, okay, well, let's work on it. So that's the kind of stuff you want to develop there. So those were 3 like kind of ones explained in a bit more detail. Obviously, you can take this presentation away, so this has got loads more. But this are just some other activities here that you'll see. So Key Stage 1, whoever said Lego, brilliant. You can incorporate this with an IT skill. So when I'm doing Lego, I also get them to take photos step by step. It's really nice for SEND learners as well, because there's no writing involved. So they're taking a step-by-step photos. They're making an algorithm, but just through photos rather than writing. I've got loads of these. Feel free to bug me if you want, because I can send them over. Loads of different things, just pictorial things for Key Stage 1. So EOFS Key Stage 1, just sequencing stuff for crossing the road, washing your hands, brushing your teeth. There's loads out there. BBC on Key Stage 1 has a really nice short video about what an algorithm is as well, introducing this. And then Key Stage 1, EOFS again, nursery rhymes is really nice. There's a lesson, it's a free lesson, it's a free PDF by iCompute that I pulled, which has little photos for nursery rhymes. So again, it's getting them to order them. So those are just some nice ones for Key Stage 1. And then lower Key Stage 2, there are lots of things that you can kind of pull off. There are resources for each lesson. So these are all examples from Barefoot Computing, which are absolutely free. You've got stuff about patterns. There's a lesson all on recipes and things like that, looking for different patterns and recipes, looking for similarities and differences, which is a one-off lesson you can do there. Logical reasoning, there's one about Sudoku, which is really nice. Stuff like this ties into your maths anyway, okay, but this is a really nice one because it gets them to work in pairs, and they can't put a number in unless they both agree. So it's just trying to think about logic, which way you're going to do it. And decomposition, again, you can do this with any activity, like I say, school day, and break it into smaller parts. But there's a nice one on like hand drives and dances and stuff like that, where they have to break it down. So there are loads of free lessons, and I'm only talking when I say unplugged, 1 or 2 a year. That's it for each year group, just to kind of focus on that. Upper Key Stage 2 then, personally what I do is I kind of assume that they've learned everything by the time they get to 5 and 6, if you do 1 or 2 lessons every year. So for me, Upper Key Stage 2 is much more application. What I really like at year 5 level is I move away from algorithms being a bit of pseudocode or just written or pictures, and I look at flowcharts. So I normally just do this as 2 or 3 lessons. We look at flowcharts and what they actually mean, and then we do a flowchart I normally do for making a cup of tea. Something simple that everyone knows how to do. My only teaching points are that your square ones are instructions and your diamonds are questions. Okay, but there's loads of stuff out there. Again, you can ask me, I've done some lessons, feel free to share them, but start to get them to actually then apply their understanding of algorithms into this pictorial flowchart kind of understanding. Tim.
2 questions relating to the nursery rhymes link. One person's asking what the link was for the pictures, the nursery rhymes link.
Yeah.
Another person saying, I'd love the iCompute link for nursery rhymes pictures to sequence.
iCompute link nursery rhymes. You see me trying to Google it now. I think, let me just find it. If not, I will pop it in the chat towards the end, because I have got the PDF. So if I cannot find it right now, that doesn't look like it's it. What I will do is I will find it and tweet it, if that's okay.
Cool.
Or right at the end of the session, as soon as I'm finished, I will find it and put it in the chat if those people want to just hang around, because I have got it, but without opening all my files and probably mucking up the screen. I'll come back to it. But I have got it. It's a really good one. iCompute, they kind of sell schemes. I've never bought one of their schemes, but one of the things they did show was this nursery rhymes, and you can print them off and laminate them, and it's just a really nice activity. I leave it as one of my structured play activities for EYFS, so it's just something that can be left. So we'll find that.
Great, thank you. That's great. Ola's asked, do we get the PowerPoint, please? Yes, you can actually get the PowerPoint now. If you go into your dashboard and click on handouts, there'll be a copy of the PDF there. If you're unable to see it, let me know and I'll chat with you I'll chat with you separately. Okay, thank you. All done for now. Thank you.
And I tell you what, I think that it is just loading. That I've found, yes, I have. I've just found this link, so I will send this across in the chat. I will probably just send this to Tim and he can put that in. There we go. So yeah, so Upper Key Stage 2, it's a little bit more application stuff like this, which is really nice. Get them to create it. And what I then do is I do this as a sequence of lesson where I put in my IT skills. So again, by year 5, I work with schools and say you should be teaching Word in every year group, just my personal opinion, or not Word, I should say, document processing. Whether we use Google Docs or Microsoft Word is a different argument, but you should be teaching that. So by year 5, they should know how to enter text boxes, how to center, how to add text, so then we actually make this on a laptop afterwards. So that is kind of 2 skills in one, that we kind of look at it and then we do it. If you want some more stuff on these flowcharts, these are taken again from code-it, cannot sell Phil Bag enough, he's brilliant. This was one that I really like using if I'm doing a success criteria in a certain subject. I just do it as an algorithm as well. So it's just getting them to understand that it's still a set of instructions that we're going to have to follow, so why not do it in an algorithm? And this just has a flow chart. So again, you can do this for grammar, and there's ones, the link is on here if you download, for loads of spellings. So these are really nice spelling rules ones that are already done as well. So they can follow the flow charts, they're getting to understand, can they read algorithms in this way as well, and then input in the letters. So that's just something, again, takeaway that I kind of put in at Key Stage 2 or Upper Key Stage 2. And a really nice year 6 kind of activity, the last one that's out there as well, is what he did is he made some flowcharts for playground games. So there's one for like tag, stuck in the mud, bulldog, all those kind of different things. And again, it's kind of like an application lesson, an unplugged lesson. We look at flowcharts in the classroom, take them out on the playground. Can they read the flowchart? Can they understand what game it is? And then they get to play it, part of a PE warm-up. So I'm just incorporating my computer in some laminated sheets in the start of a PE lesson. If you go onto that website and download them, what's really nice as well, because I work in a lot of schools that are like, well, we have mixed 5-6 classrooms. So he's actually done a load that have got bugs in as well. So I normally just print them on a different colour piece of paper, give you a 5's the completed algorithm, give you a 6's the ones with bugs in, and say, well, yeah, you've got to figure out where this algorithm has a mistake. If you can debug it and show me, I want you to do that first, and then you can set up the game and play it. So it's just another way to kind of link it in. And then the last unplugged activity, which I kind of put it last, but I love it, and I'm sure everyone's bored to death of hearing of it. But the jam sandwich bot. If you haven't seen this, there's a link there to YouTube, which is Phil Bagg himself just acting it out. This is a lesson that I have done with year 2 to year 6. You could do it with any year group. There was someone who was going around on Twitter, I think a year 2 teacher the other week, that had done it. But it's a really nice way of just emphasizing algorithms and understanding. The teacher is a robot. The children have to write an algorithm to make you a jam sandwich. There's resources out there on his website. So I always used to say that your algorithm has to start with left hand or right hand. That's what I understand as a computer. So that's my start command. And then they have to tell me what to do. And essentially, you are at the front playing devil's advocate. If they say scoop jam, I literally scoop it with my hands, wear gloves, that kind of stuff. But you're just being a pain. So you're getting them to think about, I'm a computer. I will do exactly what you tell me to do. If it goes wrong, it's not my fault, it's your fault because your algorithm isn't precise enough. So it's a really nice practical lesson, gets in all that precision, gets in all the debugging, thinking about it, evaluating their algorithms until they come back and they've written one that you can do. And then what I do when I do it with year 6s is then the year 6s become the robot as well. So it's a really nice practical activity. So that's kind of first half of the session done. I say half because I'm looking at time, but this won't take as long. That's kind of then your main computational thinking. So in my opinion, it's the stuff that massively gets lost in teaching. We go, right, we're going to do BBots. Brilliant, do BBots in Key Stage 1, but put in those prior lessons so they understand what an algorithm is, because otherwise they just go, I press these buttons on a BBot and it does something. And they don't start to understand that they are creating an algorithm, they're creating a program for a computer to then complete. So put in some of those before, and it really, really helps. The second part that I want to then talk about is more maybe Key Stage 2. But it's all about concepts as well. So we've got those computational thinking concepts that we've got to learn. But what you have at Key Stage 2 is you have specific vocabulary, which is still specific learning points, which is concepts, which I would say needs to be taught. Okay, so it's that second objective on the Key Stage 2 computer science objective, which has these words here mentioned. So it has sequence. Sequence does come in at year 2. So by all means, you can pull this year 2 activity into year 2. It has repetition, selection, and variables. Now, in my opinion, that is the order that I would teach them in. Okay, I haven't got a computer science degree. I've merely taught in schools for years, and this is the way that I best see it progressing. You need to learn the one prior to be able to teach it. I'm not saying you have to go and do this in your schools, but again, Ofsted are coming in going, we want progression. How is what you do in computer science different in year 3 to year 6? Well, here you go, because this is the skill that they're specifically learning and mastering in year 3, which builds progressively onto the skill that they will learn and master in year 4 and year 5. Okay, so that is my justification for Ofsted, is each year group has something to learn. They learn it and they learn it well and they know it. And then the next year they build, they take that skill and they learn another skill. Okay, but I am doing a scratch session on progression, which I think I've put on here next week. So that'll, if you want some more information about that, you can. But you'll also might be thinking right now, so there's nothing on year 6. In year 6, I normally take everything that we've learned and we do an inputs and outputs units. So we'll use crumbles or microbits or makey-makeys or something like that to apply. And also I think in year 6, they should have learned all their skills. They should have that application, making games, making projects that are actually quite fun. Okay. Again, this is something from the NCCE on their courses, their free courses that are running, or their bursary funded courses that are running. This is something that they take, and it's the same kind of progression. Okay, so sequence, repetition, selection, variables. And we're going to talk about those 4 really briefly today. One thing that I'm going to say is all of these links, please, like I say, download this handout and take them. These are all from Phil Bagg again, from code.it, cannot stress them enough. I've made PowerPoints on this. If you want them, bug me, I'll send them to you. But I've taken his stuff and I use it in a lot of my teaching myself. So in the schools I teach, this is how I do it. So what I mean by concepts before coding, you know, we've already got our overarching concepts of logic and abstraction and decomposition and algorithms. Now we've got Key Stage 2, we've got our specific concepts that we need to learn. So how I would teach it, and I'm going to show you for each one, is I would start with some everyday understanding. So what does this mean in real life? Okay, what does sequence mean in real life? What does repetition mean in real life? This will take you here to a presentation, which is great. You can do some snippets from that. Then I do a bit of role play. So actually getting the children to act out those specific things that they're looking at. And again, if you take this link off this presentation, it will take you to another presentation with loads of examples where you can just snip and put them into your own. And then the last thing I do is I use the coding formats. So that concrete element that I talked about before, I print off the scratch cards with actual stuff to them to act out. And then after those 3 lessons or 2 lessons, we then go on to Scratch, okay, or the platform that you're choosing to use in your school. So I'm just going to spend the last 10 minutes just showing you what that looks like for each subject. Hopefully it'll make a bit more sense than me just saying this are the 3 steps. So for sequence, step 1 would be a conversation with the children, literally 5 minutes or so. What does it mean by sequence? Okay, looking at it for real life, if you're given directions, following teacher's instructions, using a sat nav, all that kind of stuff. So we just have a bit of a discussion about what sequence is. It means to be ordered. Does it need to be in a certain order? Does it matter if you give it in the wrong order? If you're given instructions, does it matter if you say turn left before you turn right? And just a bit of open discussion about that. Then we go to that role play, so we act it out. Okay, and that presentation, there's loads on there. You don't need to come up with your own. Download the presentation, pull it into like a smart notebook or a PowerPoint. He's got stuff like this. So we've always got start commands. So again, you can't go to, let's say, start, which is something they need to know for Scratch, so it's emphasizing that. And then there's just little things to follow. So stand, wave, bow, jump, smile, sit. And I literally say go. You're the robot. This is my algorithm. Act it out. Okay. It just gives them a chance to think, well, this is what a sequence is. It's something in a specific order. There are, on the PowerPoint, there's different ones. So we're talking about how is this one better because it's being more specific. Someone could wave 5 times, someone could wave once. Both of them are right because the computer hasn't told me, or the algorithm hasn't told me how many times to do it. And then within these sessions, what I then do is once I've kind of done a couple on whiteboards or jotters, if you've got computing jotters, get the children to come up with some of their own, find a partner, act it out. Okay, as simple as that, but they're understanding that concept of what sequencing is. And then this is one more step that I think is massively lost, which is something that this is that concrete step, which I say is so important. And again, on Code IT, he's made loads of these. You can, and someone's going to ask me for it, and I don't know where it is, and I will have to find this and tweet it. There is an add-in that you can get onto Google Drive, so Google Docs, which is a Scratch add-in, which allows you to create your own ones of these. I do have some of these which are blank, so you can laminate and fill in your own. So that's normally something I do with the children, allow them to write on them. But there is an add-in if you wanted to create any of your own. But regardless, this link here will take you to some ones for sequence. I then have loads of these. I print them off, I laminate them, I get the children to act it out. Okay, and without them knowing, what they are doing is they're being exposed to this code. They will start to work out that blue is movement and purple blocks are kind of like looks. They're starting to kind of understand what Scratch is before we've even put them on Scratch. Okay, so this is the step that I think is massively important. And what I would do is I would do this for each concept. So that sequence, which I would do I do it as either end of year 2 or beginning of year 3. Then there's repetition. Repetition would be my year 3 starting point. So again, everyday repetition. Where do we see it in life? Do they know anything? Rhymes, head, shoulders, knees and toes, print them off, get them to kind of look for the repetition and highlight it. If you're doing poetry in English, tie it in with that because that would be a really nice link. Music, I normally get mine to do the cha-cha slide. So we do it, and then we start to look at repetition in that. So give them some whiteboards. Can they actually then put that into an algorithm? What am I going to repeat? What am I not? Loads of schools use Just Dance in like PE lessons. Same thing. What is being repeated? What moves are being repeated? Certainly stuff that's current at the moment, like TikTok songs or dances like that. Okay, can they teach me a TikTok song, but can they break it down into repetition? Because you're going to end up repeating the same moves. So I want to know what you're repeating and writing it down. So just looking for stuff in real life that they can relate to. That is what repetition means. Then once they've done that, and again, this presentation has loads of examples for you, do all the practical stuff, do all the role play, do all the acting out. So just literally put stuff like this on the board that do 4 times bow. Can they read that and understand that I'm telling them how many times to do it? It's a count controlled loop. I'm telling them how many times to repeat, and then do they do it? So did they act it out? Yes or no? Okay, get them to create some of their own. Do 10 times, say hello. Write it down, get the peer to kind of act it out to see that they've got that understanding. And then what the presentation, again, that you can literally just snapshot and pull into yourselves, it takes stuff back. So it then takes sequences back. So for example, giving them bow, jump, bow, jump, bow, jump, can they break that down into repetition? So then they're starting to think about that understanding of patterns, what is being repeated, that they're bowing and jumping, and then how many times. So that's almost like for your greater depth to flip it on its head and say, well, here is the sequence. Can you find the repetition? Which is really, really good to do. If you want pre-Scratch, another thing that's really good, if you, what I like using in some lessons for repetition is it's an application called Rapid Router, which is on the computer. It's by Code for Life. There's a couple units there on repetition. They're really nice for the children to spot. And when I work with children who don't do unplug stuff, you can see that they've got no understanding of patterns. They really crumble. So this stuff, just teaching them to look for patterns and look for that repetition, is really valuable. And then again, concrete understanding, before I put them on scratch, this kind of stuff. So getting them to act this out, because this isn't scary. This isn't daunting to teachers or to pupils, because all of this they understand. Repeat 4 times, bow, say woof. Okay, it's not like change costume. It's not all of that stuff that scares children and teachers at this stage. It's just it's code that they can understand. But can they read the code? Because if they can't read this, they ain't going to stand a chance going on to scratch and trying to create it themselves. So it's a really valuable step. The repeat block is exactly the same as what they'll find on scratch. They get exposed to, okay, it's orange, it says repeat, I put the number in, that changes it. It's just a really nice concrete step before you put them on the abstract. And there's some other links as well that are on there. There's other stuff. So once you've done loops and repetition, which is what I would focus on in year 3, you have continuous loops, which is on the presentation again. Loop always. So get them to do this and see how bored they get after 2 minutes, and then tell them to stop. But they are continuously going to stand and sit, stand and sit. So that's if they're putting repetition, if they're putting a forever loop in their program, they need to know that it's going to do it forever. Okay. And the same here, nested loops. So they can have loops within a loop. And this is really nice for your greater depth for them to understand. Do they do this right? Okay. Do they go boo, jump, and then wave and do the whole thing 3 times? So it's just that step of getting them to understand code before you put them on something else. Then 2 more. So again, that'd be my year 3, year 4. Start to do selection. So everyday selection. Selection is that if this is happening, what's going to happen, what's going to go. So it's your condition and your action. Okay. If you don't tidy your room, I'll be very cross. If it's cold outside, put a coat on. If it's raining, take an umbrella. So get them to come up with some of their own. So just looking for consequence and action. Okay, subordinate clauses and stuff like that in English if you want to tie it in there. And then the last one you can do is that if else. So if you do your jobs, I'll pay you pocket money. Else, no pocket money. So again, the presentation has loads of these, which your children can do. Act them out. So right, we're doing this one. If you're hungry, put your hand up. So he puts their hand up. If you like computing, smile. Again, get the children to go and write some of their own. So they're starting to understand that that if is a command and there's a condition, or a condition and there's an action. Okay. And these ones, again, just put these on the board, get them to act them out. If you're a girl, stand, else bow. So then they're starting to think they've got 2 options. And this is when because this is what they're going to use in their code. If they want to make a quiz, they need to go, if the answer is this, then say well done, else say try again. So it's just allowing them to understand it. And again, there's some concrete coding examples for you to take, for you to print. The PDFs are there, and just get them to act them out. Again, this isn't scary. They're not looking for these blocks. They're not having to find these blocks and scratch and put them in, but they're starting to understand, okay, this is what the code is going to look like when I do go into scratch. I'm going to look for this if command, which looks like this, and I've got an else. So again, just stand there, go and touch them on the shoulder, then they've got to do these things. If I don't touch them on the shoulder, they should be bowing and frowning, and they should be doing this forever. They can't stop until I tell them to stop. So it's just allowing children to read code, understand what they've read, take that in. Before then, you put them on a scratch lesson. Scratch lesson today is we're now using the if statement to make a racing car game. Okay, so they've got that understanding. And the last one then that I would do in year 5 is variables. Variables are always really hard. Variables are like, I would say it's like a whiteboard, which is again what other people said. It's just a way of storing data. Or there's some stuff on Barefoot, which is quite nice, which is saying variables are like a box. So it's just a place that you put your information in. So again, scoreboards and stuff like that, it's a variable, it's holding the score. So there's some everyday ones, although it's a little bit harder to find everyday examples. But there are some nice stuff for acting it out, which is on there. So again, you have a whiteboard, this is your variable, this is our box, this is where our number goes. So you choose a variable, okay, they write a number down and then you just replace it in sentence. So where it says my number, that's what we're relating to here, and then you can change a sentence. So I have my number years old, or I have my number friends. So stuff like this, which is just getting them to think about it and getting them to act out. So assign 4 to fave number and then hum 4. You can say, well, how many seconds are you going to hum for? You're going to hum for 4 because it's been set up here. Do 4 times stand sit, jump 4 times. So it's just getting them to start to think about it in that way. That's what a variable is. And then again, there's some concrete stuff for them to kind of act out. So I would laminate these, put these out, get them to think about it. So set the variable to Jane, then just read this out. And again, this can all be done in one quick lesson, but this one lesson is really going to help before you put them on scratch. It's just going to help with that understanding. So again, there's some more here which I laminate, take them to school before we do variables. That we're setting times to 4 and then repeat times there. So they will then know that this orange code, and this looks exactly the same when they get on Scratch, this is how I write a variable, this is when I'm going to change the number. And again, it's starting to think like this: set times to 5, repeat 5 times, but then change 5 times by -2. How many times are you now going to bark? Okay, just getting them to really understand that code and understand how it's written there. So when we talk about concepts before coding, there's twofold almost. There is the computational thinking skills that should be done in unplugged activities, but this kind of sequence of activities before you go into Scratch for me is so important, that you look at everyday repetition, you look at repetition acting it out, and then you look at the code. And to me, this is the step that's almost missing. We go, yeah, okay, they understand the algorithm, they understand debugging, let's go straight onto Scratch. One lesson like this can change your sequence, because it's just going to make it a lot easier for them. So I am going to stop talking because I'm just looking at time and I am pretty much done. The other thing that I just wanted to mention, as part of the CAS Inspire events, if you click on that link, there is a session on producing effective progression in primary schools, and I am doing a slot on progression in Scratch, so kind of taking what we talked about today, but actually how can you then do your Scratch lessons with your teaching. But there's 4 of us talking at this, so it's a really good if you're free. I should really have put the date on here. It's next week, but the link there will take you how to book on. It's really worth coming along to if you want a little bit more information about Scratch and other things. They're going to talk about vocabulary, they're going to talk about a lot more stuff. But yeah, that's it from me. Hopefully you found it useful. Hopefully there's loads of stuff to take away. Like I said, please do download the handout, because all those links will take you to the pages. And like I said, for that last bit, just on those concepts, they're all snippets from that website. The 2 presentations there are free to download. They're not presentations, unfortunately, they're like saved as a PDF, but you can just take the screen grabbing from your the snippet tool from Windows. If you've got a Windows device, just type in snippet tool and you can then screenshot and you can put that into your own lessons. So yeah, hopefully you found that useful. Hopefully it just made you think more than anything, maybe about the progression in your school, and just a way to kind of structure certainly the computer science units.
Thank you, Rachel. Before I do some summaries, I have quite a question. Can you recommend books and resources that can be used to teach computer science in the foundation stage and key stage 1?
Books and resources. Not necessarily books and resources. I've never really used books, to be honest, as a place to kind of go. For key stage 1, certainly for computer science, I would say that a lot of it's practical. So it would be, for me, I mainly use the 2 things. I use BBots as my teaching unit, and I use Scratch Junior, certainly year 1, year 2. So the NCCE, I'll Teach Computing, have written a free scheme of work from key stage 1 to key stage 4. There, in every year group, there's 6 units, and within those units, there's 2 programming units. So I would check those out, because for key stage 1, year 1 and year 2, programming A is like BBot based work, and programming B is Scratch Junior based work, which is, to be honest, the 2 things that I would recommend for key stage 1 to teach. So I would download those as a unit. Then you'll get 24 lessons for year 1 and 2 to kind of look at as a starting point, which is probably better than buying a book to kind of look at. EYFS is a little bit different. What I kind of do is pull back. So whoever that is, if you want to message me on Twitter or anything, I can kind of send over my EYFS guidance. With EYFS, I kind of take the key stage 1 and just pull in. So it's just a few apps and a few little tricks and websites. It's kind of knowing where to go to find the best stuff, really. So,
brilliant, yeah. Thank you. I haven't got too many other questions. Mainly, Rachel Coulthard has shared some books, which I'll post in the chat. Covering, well, she's not shared books, but she said she'll be covering books in her CAS community event next week. So
amazing.
Because Rachel has said that, I have shared the link to her event next week, and she will cover those books. So thank you, Rachel. Some really good comments, some really positive and praisey comments from people. Thank you so much, Rachel. This is really helpful for moving forward with computing in our school. Really useful, fantastic stuff. Thank you so much. So some really nice positive comments. My take from it. Oh, go for it, Rachel.
I was just going to say one thing that I haven't mentioned, although I did that at the end, is the NCC, the Teach Computing website. There are programming units for every year group, which does cover Scratch. Okay, what I haven't done is obviously talked about Scratch, but what I would say is these steps are just things to put in before. So if you are thinking computer science as a whole, don't feel like you're on your own. That, like I say, that progression, the CAS event next week, we'll talk about loads more, but there are places to find all the Scratch stuff. What today was merely is just like trying to put in those one-off lessons before you head to that. But there are loads of things out there for computer science if you need it as well, resources wise.
Brilliant.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's great. My personal take is the sheer number of resources available in this arena, and just what you've very neatly done is how you've aligned it to the requirements of curriculum. And I think, you know, it's a really fantastic session that you've done. And please, everyone, make sure you have downloaded those slides, because there's so much to cut, so much good stuff there. Please share your comments on social media. As I mentioned in the chat, if you want to comment on Rachel directly, her Twitter handle is Miss Fiddler, and mine is Kaz Midlands, and use the Kaz Inspire 20 as the hashtag. At the end of this webinar, a short survey will appear on the screen. We would really appreciate it if you take a minute to complete the survey, as it helps us to be better. And we do have, as Rachel has mentioned, we have a number of sessions coming up in the KS Inspire series. Starting, in fact, tomorrow, we have a session on social media. We have a great panel of teachers who are experts in social media across all platforms. So Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook will all be covered tomorrow. I'm really excited about the Instagram one, because the lady who's on that, Sarah Tricky, she has grown about several thousand followers in just a few months through her ways on Instagram. So I'm really keen to find out more about that. And then, of course, tune into sessions next week. We do have a session in particular, which Rachel is part of, which is about progression routes in primary schools and producing effective progression routes, which is next Wednesday, which I can highly recommend. Other than that, thank you again. I hope that you enjoyed the session. And as I say, look forward to seeing you at the other sessions in the KS Inspire series. Thank you and goodbye.